now we would have a final session, and assuming that, except me, everyone is very exhausted, we could just have a wrap-up session debating some ideas, and then, because basically the idea of this final session was the following. We are on the verge of proposing our doctorate program, so it would be a very rich opportunity to exchange ideas on law and development and legal methodology and so on. So, but considering that we debated all these issues during these 2 days, I think that would be too much even to me to ask you more on this. But Dave taught us a lot of things, and one of those things is that it is necessary to have a wrap-up session in these conferences in order to get the things on the ground. So it's open to final remarks and final comments, and then we can finish this event.
Do you want the final comments about the event, or you want some comments from the event that indicate the position we should take for the doctoral?
I think that's the second option. I think that all the tables gave us the opportunity to better know the positions of the faculty and the guests, and I think that we have now some good material to reflect on. So,
may I ask you something?
Sure, you are the dean.
No. It's just, I think if you want to use this group of people to reflect and give some advice on how to proceed regarding the doctoral. And okay, and since there are several people here that did not participate, perhaps you could put what is the disjunctives or what are the issues, or don't feel obliged to do it. If you think it's too much for this moment, we just don't need to do the last session. You know. Yeah, so since you are glad and you have the energy that the others do not have, you have the floor.
Did I say energy?
Always.
Okay. So actually, in a way, I'm going to go back over things I've said, but when I gave my talk on, when was it? Seems like a month ago. It was yesterday. I didn't realize the debate that was going on. It was only afterwards that I learned that, and while I addressed it, not knowing it, a lot of the issues, I didn't do it in a systematic way. So I'd like a minute, 5 or 6 actually, to address the question of what is law and development. Everybody, I mean, I'm supposed to be the inventor, right? Oh yes, I phoned it up, I remember the day. But actually not, but I did publish early on, so that gives me a certain historical precedence. So I answered these questions in a very unsystematic way, because they were raised, you know, by individual questions that weren't quite focused on what, or didn't quite reveal their relationship to the debate. I'm looking for Tiago, but I guess he's left. Too bad, because he asked some questions and I didn't understand the extent to which he was asking questions that were coming out of the debate. Okay. So I'm going to say a few words about what law and development, in my mind, is not, and what it is. Okay? So what is law and what is it not? It's not a field, if by a field you mean something with clear boundaries, standardized methodologies, structured interaction of participants, agreed on canons. It's none of those things. It's also not the exclusive go-to place for ideas about law in developing countries. It's not, partly because it's hard to find law in development. It's all around, and yet it's not, easily. And there's lots of ideas that don't come in that package that provide tools to deal with the questions of the kind we've heard all day and yesterday. Nor, scholars in self-estrangement to the contrary notwithstanding, don't forget it was written over 40 years ago, it's not something controlled by development agencies. Influenced by development agencies? Absolutely. But it's an academic enterprise that's cast loose from those ties. I don't hear a lot of the World Bank in Katerina's wonderful presentation. She's going on an academic project which also has real-world significance. It's not being dictated by some foreign aid agency, as law and development might have been in the very early years. So those are the things it's not. What is it? It's legal realism in the tropics. So what do I mean by that? Well, what did American legal realism contribute to world jurisprudence? Building on American pragmatism, the legal realist said, law is what it does. That's what the law is. It's what it actually matters. It's what the difference it makes in society, economy, polity. That's what law is. So we talk about the law in the books and the law in action, but from this point of view, law in action is the law. That's what it is. The law in the books is just words. So if that's what law and development is in its core, of course there will be empirical research that's relevant, because to find out what the law in action is, you can't just look in a book. What methods you use, talk to 3 people in a bar, look at a gigantic database. All of these things can be done, but it's just getting at what is happening, what the law is doing, or in many cases, not doing. Now, this may be empirical work, but it is doctrinally informed empirical work. It is empirical work done with the norm in mind as a sort of starting point and also ending point. So the idea that there's some dichotomy between doctrine and empirical work, and that law and development is just empirical and doctrine is off somewhere else, modestly speaking, is crazy. So it's legal realism in the tropics, and it's lots of stuff out there, lots of things to read and think about and talk to people about. It may not come under that label. It may be called law and capitalism. It may be called law and human rights. It may be just called human rights. It could be something, a number of things that speak to the broader issues of how law, anywhere, but particularly in this case, in the global South, relates to some social vision, some normative ideal, some emancipatory project. And that literature, whether it comes with an L&D stamp on it or not, is a great resource for you, but it could be anywhere. It could be in management studies. It could be in economics, it could be in sociology, it could be in political science, it could actually be in law. Just plain law without an and. So my sense is, you've got it. You're doing it. You know the famous story about the gentleman, Moliere's, about the gentleman who realized all his life he'd been speaking prose. Well, you're all speaking law and development. That's what's been going on for 2 days. You've got the vocabulary. You've got the grammar. Just keep talking.
Okay. So, I'm glad by you bringing back legal realism. We have been insisting since the beginning of this enterprise, I think since the first moment that Adi invited a group of people to help him put this school together. And we were guessing, the group, not him. Perhaps he had an idea, but the group was saying, why us? And he didn't know any of us. He were not friends. He were not our tutors. We had no connection with them. And I received one explanation, not from him, but a person that talked with him said, because you are not orthodox jurists, because you have a different methodology, both of teaching and of researching. And what was different among this group was that people care about the facts. They care about what was going in Brazil. They didn't care only to the normative aspect, even though I think this first generation was very dogmatic. I'm a constitutional lawyer that know the dogmas, the canons of my business. I know what are the concepts and why they come to be like that. So my interpretation at that moment was that we were perhaps having the opportunity opened by this school to recreate legal realism in Brazil. For those who understand the legal history intellectual history of law in Brazil, remember that in the 30s and 20s and 30s, we had a wave of legal realism that are concomitant with what happened in Sweden or in the US or in other countries, or the institutionals in France. Oliveira Viana has a major book of the Brazilian political institutions. I think chapter 3 of volume 1, it's about public law, and is a fantastic, perhaps the most sophisticated criticism to legal formalism. That is the same value of Jeremy Frank criticism. So we had that. Unfortunately, Oliveira Viana was a fascist and racist, and we had the authoritarian state of Vargas after that. So there was an interruption, a strong interruption of this model of thinking about law, in the sense that if you leave out the normative aspect, law becomes just an instrument of oppression. So I think this is one rupture that we had. And even though other interesting, like Santiago Dantas flirted with legal realism, and other, Orlando Gomes in civil law, but most of our academic turned out to be more formalistic. And I think this school opened the opportunity for us to interact with law and facts, law and social reality, which is obviously not the legal realism from the 30s, which is obviously not, law and development from the 60s, even though because law and development suffer in some way with the same political problems in the 60s, the authoritarian regime, a law that could serve any kind of regime. So we are in a different moment. So we could call it law and development. I certainly agree that it has a law and development component. It has a legal realism component. But I think it's law in context, it's law in society, it's law with facts. And this serves us very well in the sense of the necessity of this country, in the sense that we should learn to understand the problems that we are trying to fix with law. So I think that our doctoral should follow what we are learning in the last decade with our masters, is keep eye in the ball. The ball are the facts, and the instruments that we have is the law. And we have to merge these two aspects to produce something that is absent of the debate. That is my law in the tropics realism. Okay? So, Mario, thank you very much to put us together, to lead this group. Thank you all the professors and students and our guests, which are very dear to us. We read you very carefully, and we like you a lot. Thank you.